The blue lights appeared in Ethan Cole's rearview mirror just as the late afternoon sun dipped behind the Georgia pine trees. For a brief moment, the flashing colors painted his windshield in shades of red and blue. He tightened his grip on the steering wheel and released a slow breath. The familiar feeling settled into his chest. It was not fear, it was recognition. Ethan was 46 years old and had spent more than half his life serving his country. His broad shoulders filled the driver's seat of his restored 1968 Mustang Fastback. The dark charcoal paint gleamed beneath layers of careful maintenance. The car was more than transportation. It was a reminder that patience could rebuild what time tried to destroy. He was traveling through the small Georgia town of Briar Creek on his way to Fort Benning. A meeting awaited him there the following morning. Most people would have recognized him from military publications or national security briefings. Yet today he wore faded jeans, a gray t-shirt, and old aviator sunglasses. To anyone passing by, he was simply another man driving alone on a southern highway. The police cruiser followed closely behind for nearly 2 miles before activating its lights. Ethan checked his speed, 42 miles per hour in a 45 zone. Exactly where it should be. "Here we go again," he murmured. He pulled onto the shoulder and shut off the engine. Years of discipline guided every movement. Both hands rested visibly on the wheel. His posture remained calm. His breathing stayed steady. Officer Brandon Mercer climbed from the cruiser with the swagger of a man accustomed to obedience. He was 33, heavy-set, and carried himself with the confidence that came from rarely being challenged. His mirrored sunglasses hid his eyes as he approached. "License and registration," Mercer barked. Ethan nodded politely. "My wallet is in my back pocket. Registration is in the glove compartment. I'm reaching for my wallet first." The officer frowned. "I didn't ask for a play-by-play, just move." Ethan handed over his driver's license. Mercer studied it. "Virginia, huh?" "That's correct." "What brings you through Briar Creek?" "Passing through on business." Mercer's gaze drifted toward the Mustang. His eyes lingered on the polished interior and restored dashboard. "Business must pay pretty well." Ethan remained silent. The officer leaned closer. "I clocked you doing 60 in a 45. I was traveling below the speed limit." Mercer's jaw tightened. "You calling me a liar?" The humid air seemed to freeze between them. Ethan slowly turned his head and met the officer's stare. His expression never changed. Those calm eyes had witnessed combat zones, rescue missions, and moments that haunted stronger men. Mercer looked away first. "Step out of the vehicle," he ordered. The command carried more anger than authority. Ethan considered the situation carefully. Every instinct told him the stop had little to do with traffic enforcement, yet he understood something many people never learned. Sometimes restraint required greater strength than action. He opened the door and stood. At 6'4", Ethan towered over the officer. Mercer immediately stiffened. "Hands on the car, spread your feet." Ethan complied. "Officer," he said calmly, "I am a senior officer in the United States military. My identification is in my wallet. I suggest you review it before proceeding." Mercer laughed. "Sure you are. And I'm the governor of Georgia." The officer pushed Ethan's legs apart and began a rough search. Cars rushed past on the highway, the sun sank lower, cicadas buzzed from nearby trees, then Mercer suddenly grabbed Ethan's wrist. "Turn around." Cold steel cuffs snapped shut. "You're under arrest." Ethan stared ahead. "For what charge?" "I'll decide that at the station." For the first time all afternoon, a shadow crossed Ethan's face. It wasn't anger, it was disappointment. As Mercer guided him toward the cruiser, Ethan glanced at the fading horizon. Somewhere in Washington, several powerful people expected him at a classified briefing within 24 hours. None of them yet knew he was sitting handcuffed beside a Georgia highway. But before the night ended, they would. The Briar Creek Police Department sat at the edge of town like a forgotten relic from another decade. Its faded brick walls had survived countless summers, hurricanes, and budget cuts. Inside, the air smelled of stale coffee, old paperwork, and worn-out ambition. Officer Brandon Mercer marched Ethan Cole through the rear entrance as if displaying a trophy. His chest puffed with pride. The arrest already felt like a victory in his mind. Sergeant Raymond Holt looked up from behind the booking desk. At 58, Holt had spent 30 years in law enforcement. Grey hair framed a tired face. Deep lines surrounded his eyes. He had learned long ago that trouble often arrived wearing confidence. "What do we have here?" Holt asked. "Reckless driver," Mercer replied. "Resisted instructions during a traffic stop." Holt studied Ethan carefully. The man standing before him didn't resemble the criminals who usually entered the station. His posture was straight, his breathing remained controlled. Even with handcuffs on his wrists, he looked more comfortable than Mercer did. "Name?" Holt asked. "Ethan Cole. Occupation?" "United States Army." Mercer rolled his eyes dramatically. "He's been playing that card since I pulled him over." Ethan remained silent. Holt reached for the wallet Mercer tossed onto the desk. He opened it and immediately noticed the military identification card. His eyebrows rose slightly. The card looked authentic, very authentic. "Brandon," Holt said carefully, "did you run his information through the system?" "Not yet." "Why not?" "Because I arrested him first." The answer hung awkwardly in the room. Holt frowned. Years of experience told him something felt wrong. Very wrong. Yet police culture carried its own pressures. Questioning another officer publicly often created problems that lasted for years. He hesitated. That hesitation would later haunt him. "Process him," Holt finally said. Mercer's grin returned. The booking procedure began: fingerprints, photographs, personal property inventory. Ethan surrendered his watch, cell phone, and wallet without protest. The younger officers watched with curiosity. Some whispered among themselves. The man being booked looked more like a corporate executive than a criminal. More importantly, he seemed entirely unconcerned. Most people became nervous in custody. Ethan appeared patient, as if waiting for a delayed flight. "I'd like my phone call," he said. "Later," Mercer answered. "I am requesting it now." "You'll get it when I say you get it." The officer's voice echoed through the station. Several employees glanced up. Mercer enjoyed the audience. Ethan simply nodded. "Understood." The response somehow irritated Mercer more than an argument would have. 20 minutes later, Ethan sat alone inside a holding cell. The metal bench felt cold despite the Georgia heat. Orange sunlight filtered through a narrow window near the ceiling. Outside, the town continued its ordinary routines. Families prepared dinner, children finished homework. Traffic flowed through Briar Creek without interruption. No one knew that a chain reaction had already begun. Ethan closed his eyes. He focused on controlled breathing. 4 seconds in, 4 seconds out. The technique had helped him survive situations far worse than this. Across the hallway, Mercer occasionally walked past the cell. Each time he smirked. "How's military life treating you now, Colonel?" Ethan looked up. "Officer Mercer, every minute I'm held here creates consequences you haven't considered." "Sounds like a threat." "No, it's a prediction." Mercer laughed and continued walking. Another hour passed. The sun disappeared completely. Darkness settled across Briar Creek. Finally, Sergeant Holt approached the cell carrying a keyring. His expression looked troubled. "You can make your call now," he said. Ethan stood immediately. For the first time all evening, a subtle sense of urgency appeared in his eyes. At the booking desk, Holt handed him a phone. "Keep it brief." Ethan nodded. He memorized the number years ago. No contact list required, no hesitation. The line rang once, twice, then a professional voice answered. "Secure Operations Office." Ethan's expression hardened. "This is Colonel Ethan Cole. Authentication code Sentinel-7. I need to speak with General Marcus Whitaker immediately." The room suddenly felt smaller. Mercer laughed from across the station. "General? Sure. Why not call the President too?" Nobody laughed with him. 10 seconds later, the voice on the phone returned. "Stand by, Colonel." Another pause followed. Then a new voice came through. A powerful voice, a familiar voice. "Ethan," General Whitaker said, "you're supposed to be at Fort Benning tomorrow morning. Where are you?" Ethan glanced toward Mercer. "General, I've been unlawfully detained by local law enforcement in Briar Creek, Georgia." The silence that followed was unlike any silence Ethan had ever heard. It sounded dangerous. Very dangerous. General Marcus Whitaker did not speak for several seconds. The silence traveled through the secure line like a gathering storm. Ethan had known the general for nearly 15 years. He understood what that silence meant. Someone was about to have a very bad night. "Are you injured?" Whitaker finally asked. "No, sir. Minor physical contact during the arrest. No serious injuries." "What are the charges?" "At the moment, they appear to be evolving." Across the room, Sergeant Holt's face tightened. Even he recognized the answer for what it was. A warning. General Whitaker exhaled slowly. "Put Sergeant Holt on the phone." Ethan handed the receiver over. Holt reluctantly accepted it. "This is Sergeant Raymond Holt." The color drained from his face almost immediately. "Yes, sir." A pause. "Yes, sir." Another pause. "I understand, sir." By the time Holt returned the phone, his hands were trembling. Whitaker came back on the line. "Ethan, stay exactly where you are. Don't argue with anyone. Don't sign anything. Don't answer any questions." "Understood, sir." "And Ethan?" "Yes, General?" "Look out the front window in about 45 minutes." The call ended. Ethan calmly returned the receiver. Officer Mercer leaned against the counter. "What happened? The Pentagon send you a sympathy card?" Nobody answered. Sergeant Holt stared at the desk. Something inside him was beginning to unravel. 20 minutes passed. Outside, darkness fully settled over Briar Creek. The station remained quiet. Mercer grew increasingly irritated. He wanted an argument. He wanted resistance. Instead, Ethan sat quietly in a chair near the booking area. Patient, composed, waiting. "You think somebody important is coming?" Mercer asked. "I know they are," Ethan replied. "You military people always think you're special." "No, I think accountability is special." Mercer's jaw tightened. Before he could respond, a distant vibration rattled the windows. At first it sounded like thunder, then it grew louder and louder. The building began to shake. Every officer in the station froze. Sergeant Holt slowly walked toward the front entrance. The vibration became a roar, a powerful rhythmic sound that seemed to descend directly from the sky. Holt pulled back the blinds. His eyes widened. "Dear God," Mercer hurried over. The moment he looked outside, the confidence vanished from his face. 2 military helicopters hovered above the station parking lot. Powerful rotor wash blasted dust, leaves, and debris across the pavement. Headlights appeared from every direction. Black SUVs streamed into the lot. Several government vehicles blocked both exits. Men and women in dark jackets moved with disciplined precision. Large yellow letters reflected beneath the floodlights. FBI, Department of Defense, Military Police. The parking lot looked less like a police station and more like a federal operation. Mercer's mouth fell open. "What is this?" No one answered, because nobody inside the station truly knew. The front doors burst open. A group of officials entered with unmistakable authority. Leading them was a tall woman in a navy suit. Her silver hair framed a face hardened by decades of federal service. She carried no weapon. She didn't need one. The room instantly belonged to her. "I'm Deputy Director Rebecca Lawson," she announced. "Federal Bureau of Investigation." Her eyes swept across the station. "Which officer arrested Colonel Ethan Cole?" Mercer stepped forward. The move seemed automatic, like a man volunteering for a firing squad. "I did." Lawson studied him for a long moment. Then she turned toward Ethan. "Colonel, are you all right?" "I'm fine." "Good." The single word carried visible relief. Mercer frowned. "Hold on. Nobody's explained what's happening here." Lawson slowly faced him. "Officer Mercer, 3 hours ago you detained a senior military commander assigned to several classified national security programs." The room became completely silent. "You arrested him without confirming his identity." Another pause. "You denied his legal rights." Another pause. "And according to preliminary reports, you falsified probable cause." Mercer's face turned pale. "That's not what happened." "Then you'll have every opportunity to explain yourself." Additional agents entered carrying folders. One handed Lawson a thick file. She opened it. A small smile appeared. Not a friendly smile, a dangerous one. "Interesting," she said quietly. Sergeant Holt swallowed. "What is it?" Lawson looked directly at Mercer. "It appears tonight's arrest may have uncovered something much bigger than a traffic stop." For the first time since pulling Ethan over, genuine fear appeared in Officer Brandon Mercer's eyes. And outside, more federal vehicles were still arriving. Deputy Director Rebecca Lawson placed the file on the booking desk and slowly turned its pages. Every sound inside the station seemed amplified. The ticking wall clock, the hum of fluorescent lights, the nervous breathing of officers who suddenly wished they were somewhere else. Officer Brandon Mercer stood frozen. His confidence had not disappeared entirely, but cracks were spreading through it. "I don't understand," Mercer said. "Why would the FBI show up because of one arrest?" Lawson looked at him. "Because this arrest wasn't the reason we came." The answer landed like a hammer. "What does that mean?" Sergeant Holt asked. Lawson closed the file. "It means your department has been mentioned in multiple complaints over the last 2 years. Nobody spoke. Several motorists reported questionable traffic stops. Another pause. Several reported vehicle seizures that were never fully explained. Another pause. Several reported missing cash after searches. Mercer's face hardened. Those people were criminals. Some were. Lawson nodded. Most were not. The station suddenly felt much colder. Ethan remained seated quietly. He watched the scene unfold without satisfaction. He had spent enough years in leadership to understand a painful truth. Corruption rarely belonged to one person. It survived because others looked away. An FBI agent approached Lawson carrying a tablet. "Ma'am, we pulled the preliminary records." Lawson reviewed the information. Her expression darkened. "Officer Mercer, how many vehicles have you personally seized in the last 4 years?" "I don't know." "The answer is 117. Mercer blinked. "So? The department average is 12. No response. Your seizure rate exceeds every officer in 3 neighboring counties combined. Still no response. Chief Douglas Harper finally arrived. The chief was 60 years old and looked exhausted before he even entered the building. He stopped immediately when he saw military personnel, federal agents, and several black SUVs outside. "What happened here?" Lawson turned toward him. "Chief Harper, federal investigators have some questions regarding department practices." The chief's face lost color. Just for a second. But Ethan noticed, so did Lawson. The veteran agent smiled slightly. She had spent decades interviewing people. Fear always revealed itself. "I run a clean department," Harper said. "Excellent," Lawson replied. "Then cooperation should be easy." Outside, additional agents entered carrying evidence boxes. Mercer stared. "What are they doing?" "Executing warrants," Lawson answered. "For what?" "Computers, financial records, body camera archives, internal communications." Mercer's stomach dropped. For the first time that evening, he looked genuinely alarmed. An agent approached Lawson and whispered something into her ear. She nodded. "Interesting." Chief Harper shifted nervously. "What now?" Lawson held up a printed document. "Now we discuss a company called Southern Asset Recovery, LLC. The chief immediately looked away. That was enough. Lawson saw it. Ethan saw it. Everyone saw it. "Never heard of it," Harper replied. The lie came too quickly. Far too quickly. Lawson placed another document on the desk. "That's unfortunate, because state records list your brother-in-law as the owner." The room fell silent. "And records also show that Southern Asset Recovery purchased 37 seized vehicles from Briar Creek auctions during the last 3 years. Nobody moved, nobody breathed. Mercer slowly sat down. His face had become pale, very pale. The investigation was no longer about him. It was becoming something larger, much larger. An FBI agent entered carrying a laptop. "Ma'am, we recovered deleted files from the department server." Lawson accepted the computer. "Already?" "They weren't deleted very well." She opened the files. A series of emails appeared. Financial spreadsheets, auction records, vehicle transfers, bank deposits. The evidence stretched back years. Lawson slowly looked up. Chief Harper had stopped making eye contact. That told her everything she needed to know. Then another message arrived on the laptop. The agent reading it suddenly frowned. "Ma'am." "What is it?" "You need to see this immediately." Lawson leaned closer. Her eyes narrowed. The room waited. Several seconds passed. Then she looked directly at Ethan. "Colonel, it appears your arrest accidentally exposed something we weren't expecting." "What kind of something?" Ethan asked. Lawson closed the laptop, a corruption network operating across 3 counties. Even the FBI agents looked surprised. The number of names appearing in those files was far greater than anyone anticipated. And near the top of the list sat a name that made Deputy Director Lawson's expression turn deadly serious. A sitting state senator. The revelation hit the room like a lightning strike. A state senator, not a local official, not a department administrator, a sitting member of the Georgia State Senate. Chief Douglas Harper sank into a chair. His hands trembled visibly. Officer Brandon Mercer looked from face to face, searching desperately for reassurance. None existed. Deputy Director Rebecca Lawson closed the laptop and folded her arms. "Nobody leaves this building," she said. The command carried immediate authority. Federal agents moved into position. Several officers from Briar Creek exchanged nervous glances. Others stared at the floor. The brotherhood that once protected them suddenly felt fragile, very fragile. Ethan Cole remained silent. He had seen organizations collapse before: military units, private contractors, government agencies. The pattern was always the same. The corruption started small. One shortcut, one compromise, one excuse. Eventually the rot spread so deeply that nobody remembered where it began. Lawson pointed toward a conference room. "Chief Harper, Officer Mercer, you're coming with me." Neither man argued. They followed her inside. The door closed. For nearly an hour, federal agents worked throughout the station. Computers were seized, records were photographed, storage cabinets were opened. Every piece of information was collected. Outside, television vans began arriving. Word traveled fast in small towns. Word traveled even faster when helicopters were involved. Sergeant Holt stood near the front window. "I should have stopped this years ago," he said quietly. Ethan looked at him. "Then why didn't you?" The question wasn't hostile. That made it harder to answer. Holt stared into the darkness. "Because it happened slowly." He sighed. "At first it was just complaints, then rumors, then things that didn't feel right. Every time I considered speaking up, somebody gave me a reason not to." "Fear?" "Partly." The older man nodded, "but mostly convenience." The honesty surprised even him. Ethan understood. Most failures weren't caused by evil. Most were caused by silence. The conference room door finally opened. Lawson emerged. Her expression revealed nothing. Chief Harper followed. He looked 20 years older. Mercer looked worse. The officer's shirt was soaked with sweat. His hands shook uncontrollably. An FBI agent approached Lawson. "The senator's office just issued a statement. Already. They're denying everything." Lawson smiled. "Good, that means they're scared." She turned toward Mercer. "Officer, would you like to revise your earlier statements?" Mercer swallowed. "I want a lawyer." Smart decision. The answer seemed to crush him further. For years he had been the strongest personality in every room. Tonight he wasn't even the most important person in the hallway. A television mounted in the station lobby suddenly switched to a breaking news broadcast. Someone had turned it on. The anchor's voice filled the room. "Federal authorities have launched a major investigation in Briar Creek, Georgia, involving allegations of corruption, civil rights violations, and asset forfeiture fraud. Sources indicate the investigation may expand beyond local government officials." Everyone watched. The story was already becoming national news. Outside, reporters gathered behind police barricades. Camera lights illuminated the parking lot. The small town suddenly found itself under a spotlight. Lawson's phone rang. She answered immediately. "Lawson?" Several seconds passed. Her expression changed. Not fear, not surprise, concern. When she ended the call, the room fell silent. "What's wrong?" Ethan asked. Lawson looked directly at him. "The senator isn't our biggest problem anymore." Nobody moved. "We just received information from Atlanta." Another pause. Financial investigators traced several payments connected to this network. "To who?" Holt asked. Lawson exhaled slowly. "Someone in Washington." The words seemed impossible. The room stared at her. "How high does this go?" Ethan asked. Lawson looked toward the television screens showing live coverage from outside. Then she answered, "Higher than anyone expected." At that exact moment, another black SUV pulled into the parking lot. The agents nearest the windows immediately stiffened. Several recognized the vehicle. Lawson recognized it too. And for the first time all night, even she looked uneasy. Because the person stepping out of that SUV wasn't FBI, wasn't military, wasn't local law enforcement. The seal on the vehicle door belonged to the United States Department of Justice, and the Attorney General herself had just arrived in Briar Creek. The arrival of the Attorney General transformed the atmosphere instantly. Federal agents who had spent the evening issuing orders suddenly stood straighter. Conversations stopped. Phones disappeared into pockets. Even seasoned investigators understood what her presence meant. This was no longer a regional investigation. It had become a national one. Attorney General Victoria Reynolds stepped through the station doors wearing a dark navy suit. She moved with calm confidence, the kind that came from decades of navigating political storms. The room fell silent. "Deputy Director Lawson," she said. "Madam Attorney General." The two women shook hands. Victoria's eyes scanned the room until they settled on Ethan Cole. She immediately crossed the floor. "Colonel Cole, Madam Attorney General, I wish we were meeting under better circumstances." Ethan offered a slight smile. "I've had worse days." A few nervous laughs escaped nearby agents. The tension eased for a brief moment. Then Victoria turned serious. "Unfortunately, this situation is larger than we originally believed." Lawson handed her a tablet. Victoria reviewed several files. Her expression darkened with every page. "How many names?" she asked. "Current count is 43. Federal employees. 7 confirmed so far." The Attorney General closed her eyes briefly. Nobody in the room missed the significance. Federal corruption cases happened every year, but this was different. The network appeared organized, structured, profitable, and deeply embedded. Chief Harper lowered his head. The investigation had grown far beyond anything he imagined. He originally believed federal attention would focus on Briar Creek. Now Briar Creek looked like only one branch of a much larger tree. An FBI analyst hurried into the station. "We have a problem." Every head turned. "What kind of problem?" Lawson asked. "Someone is deleting records remotely." The room froze. "From where?" "We're not sure yet." The analyst connected a laptop to a projector. Digital activity filled the screen. Files vanished one after another. Bank records, property transfers, financial agreements, years of evidence disappearing in real time. "Can we stop it?" Victoria demanded. "We're trying." The analyst's fingers flew across the keyboard. Additional technicians joined remotely. The battle shifted from hallways and interviews to computer servers and encrypted databases. Ethan watched carefully. Military planning had taught him an important principle. People destroyed evidence only when they feared what it contained. Someone powerful had become frightened, very frightened. Minutes later, another analyst appeared on a video call. "We found the source." The room leaned forward. "Where?" The analyst hesitated. "Washington, D.C." Nobody spoke. "Specific location?" Victoria asked. The analyst swallowed. "A federal office building." The silence became absolute. Even the buzzing fluorescent lights seemed louder. Victoria stared at the screen. "Which office?" The analyst looked uncomfortable. "We're still verifying." Another pause. "But the access credentials belong to someone with top-level clearance." Several federal agents exchanged worried glances. Lawson slowly folded her arms. "That narrows the list considerably." "Not enough," Victoria replied. Outside, rain began falling. Heavy summer rain hammered the station roof. Lightning flashed across the dark sky. The storm seemed strangely appropriate. Inside, the investigation continued. For another hour, technicians raced against whoever was erasing records. Every recovered document revealed another layer. Every layer exposed another connection. Political donors, contractors, consultants, lobbyists, law enforcement officials. The web expanded in every direction. Finally, a breakthrough arrived. The lead analyst looked up from his computer. His face had gone pale. "Madam Attorney General, what is it?" "We recovered a backup server." Victoria nodded. "Good. The deleted records are intact." Relief spread through the room. Then the analyst continued. But that's not the important part. The room became quiet again. What is the important part? The analyst turned the monitor toward them. A single document appeared. At first glance, it looked ordinary. Then everyone noticed the signature. Victoria Reynolds stared at it. Lawson stared at it. Even Ethan felt a chill. The signature belonged to a man whose name appeared regularly on national television. A man considered untouchable. A man expected to announce a presidential campaign within months. The document connected him directly to the corruption network. Victoria slowly sat down. For the first time all night, she looked stunned, because the investigation that began with a routine traffic stop was now threatening the future of one of the most powerful politicians in America. By sunrise, the story had consumed every major news network in America. Satellite trucks lined the streets outside Briar Creek. Reporters filled hotel lobbies from Atlanta to Washington. Political commentators debated theories. Former prosecutors offered predictions. Everyone wanted answers. Very few people were prepared for the truth. Inside a secure federal operations center in Atlanta, Attorney General Victoria Reynolds stood before a wall of digital screens. Sleep had become a luxury none of the investigators could afford. The evidence recovered from the backup servers was overwhelming. Financial transfers, property acquisitions, encrypted communications, years of hidden transactions. The corruption network was no longer a theory. It was a documented reality. Deputy Director Rebecca Lawson entered carrying a fresh report. "We verified the signature." Victoria looked up. "No doubt?" "None." The answer settled heavily across the room. The document linked Senator William Prescott directly to shell companies that had quietly profited from illegal asset seizures across multiple states. For years, Prescott had cultivated the image of a reformer. Television audiences loved him. Donors trusted him. Voters admired him. Now investigators were discovering a second version of the man, a much darker version. "How much money?" Victoria asked. Lawson opened the report. "Conservatively, more than $100 million? Several agents stopped typing. Even experienced investigators found the number shocking. Victoria stared through the window overlooking Atlanta's skyline. Morning sunlight reflected from glass towers. The city looked peaceful. Meanwhile, a political earthquake was building beneath it. Across town, Ethan Cole sat alone in a secure conference room. The previous 24 hours felt surreal. One traffic stop had become a national crisis. He thought about the countless Americans whose names appeared in the files. People who lost cars, businesses, savings, opportunities. Many never recovered. For them, justice had arrived years too late. A knock interrupted his thoughts. General Marcus Whitaker entered. "Mind if I sit?" "Of course not, sir." The general lowered himself into a chair. For several moments, neither man spoke. Sometimes silence communicated more than words. "You know," Whitaker finally said, "I've spent 35 years worrying about foreign threats." Ethan nodded. "Me too. Funny thing is, some of the worst damage comes from inside the fence." The observation lingered between them. History offered countless examples. Empires rarely collapsed from a single attack. Most weakened from within. Greed, pride, corruption, the oldest enemies, remained the most dangerous. Back at the operations center, alarms suddenly sounded. Investigators looked up. An analyst stood. "We've got movement." Victoria crossed the room. "What kind of movement?" "Private aircraft." A map appeared on the main screen. Several flight paths flashed red. "Whose aircraft?" The analyst enlarged the data. A long silence followed. People connected to Prescott. The room exploded into activity. Phones rang. Orders flew across departments. Agents rushed toward exits. Victoria immediately understood the implication. People were running, which meant they believed exposure was inevitable. The investigation had entered a dangerous phase. Desperate people made reckless decisions, sometimes violent decisions. An hour later, a federal judge signed emergency warrants. By afternoon, arrests began across 3 states. Financial advisors, lobbyists, former officials, business executives. Each arrest revealed additional information. Each confession expanded the case. Then came the call nobody expected. Deputy Director Lawson answered personally. Her expression changed immediately. "Slow down," she said. The room watched. When did this happen? Another pause. Are you certain? She listened carefully, then ended the call. Victoria stepped closer. What happened? Lawson looked around the room. Every investigator waited. Senator Prescott is gone. Nobody understood. Gone where? Lawson shook her head. His security team can't find him. The room became silent. His phones are off. Another pause. His vehicle was abandoned near a private airfield. Victoria felt a cold sensation settle into her stomach. This investigation had already exposed corruption. Now it was becoming a manhunt. And somewhere beyond the cameras, headlines, and court documents, one of the most powerful men in America had disappeared without a trace. The disappearance of Senator William Prescott transformed a corruption investigation into a national emergency. Within hours, federal agencies coordinated across state lines. Airports were monitored, border alerts were issued, financial institutions flagged suspicious activity. Every available lead was pursued. Yet Prescott remained invisible. For the first time in decades, a man who spent his life in front of cameras had vanished completely. The news cycle intensified. Television anchors interrupted programming with special reports. Political allies distanced themselves publicly. Former supporters claimed they had seen warning signs. Opponents demanded prosecutions. America watched the story unfold in real time. Meanwhile, Ethan Cole found himself pulled deeper into events he never intended to influence. He sat inside a secure federal briefing room surrounded by investigators, prosecutors, military officials, and intelligence analysts. A giant digital map filled one wall. Red markers identified known associates connected to Prescott's network. The number continued growing. We've confirmed 87 active participants, Deputy Director Lawson explained. Murmurs spread across the room. The scope exceeded everyone's expectations. And that's only what we can prove today, she added. Attorney General Victoria Reynolds rubbed her temples. The investigation was becoming one of the largest public corruption cases in modern American history. The political consequences alone could reshape elections nationwide. Then a young intelligence analyst raised her hand. We found something unusual. Every head turned. Go ahead. The analyst projected a series of financial records. 2 days before Senator Prescott disappeared, several encrypted transfers moved through offshore accounts. Victoria leaned forward. How much money? Approximately $62 million. The room fell silent. Destination? The analyst hesitated. We're still tracing it. Then she enlarged a map. But one location appears repeatedly. A small dot appeared on the screen. Not New York, not Washington, not Miami. A remote coastal community outside Savannah, Georgia. The location seemed oddly insignificant, which made it immediately suspicious. Ethan studied the map. Years of military planning sharpened his instincts. Something felt wrong. Very wrong. What's there? He asked. The analyst switched screens. Property records appeared. Photographs followed, an isolated waterfront estate hidden among marshland and dense forest. Private docks, security cameras, restricted access roads. Enough infrastructure to support someone avoiding public attention. General Whitaker leaned closer. Who owns it? The analyst clicked another file. The answer surprised everyone. The property officially belonged to a charitable foundation, a foundation controlled by Senator Prescott. The room immediately came alive. Investigators exchanged rapid instructions. Federal agents prepared deployment plans. Lawson looked toward Victoria. It's worth checking. Agreed. Within an hour, teams were moving. Helicopters lifted from nearby bases. FBI tactical units deployed. Federal marshals joined the operation. The goal was simple: find Prescott. The weather turned hostile as evening approached. Heavy clouds rolled in from the Atlantic. Rain hammered the Georgia coastline. Strong winds bent trees and churned dark water across the marshes. The approaching storm complicated everything, but it also created urgency. If Prescott was there, waiting could be disastrous. Hours later, the first teams arrived near the estate. Drone footage streamed back to command centers. Investigators watched live video. The property appeared quiet. Too quiet. No visible guards, no movement, no lights. The tactical commander advanced cautiously. Agents breached the front entrance. Room after room appeared empty. Luxury furnishings remained untouched. Computers were missing, phones were missing, documents were missing. Someone had cleaned the place thoroughly, yet not thoroughly enough. A few minutes later, an agent called from the second floor. "We found something." The entire command center focused on the live feed. The agent entered a private office. Behind a large bookshelf sat a hidden room. Inside were multiple safes. Several had been emptied. One remained partially open. The contents immediately caught everyone's attention. Passports, foreign identification cards, cash bundles, and a leather notebook. The agent carefully opened it. Handwritten entries filled the pages, names, dates, payments, meetings, decisions. The notebook looked less like a journal and more like an insurance policy, a record designed to protect its owner if everything collapsed. Victoria stared at the screen. "Get that notebook to a forensic team immediately." The agent nodded. Then another voice suddenly came across the radio, urgent, breathless. "Command, we have fresh tracks near the dock." The room froze. The tactical commander responded. "How fresh?" A pause followed. Then came the answer. "Less than 6 hours old." Every investigator exchanged stunned looks. The estate wasn't an abandoned hideout. Prescott had been there, recently, very recently, which meant the most wanted man in America was no longer a ghost. He was running, and federal agents were finally close enough to follow his trail. The storm intensified throughout the night. Rain lashed the Georgia coastline with relentless force. Wind howled across the marshlands. Thunder rolled over the Atlantic like distant artillery. Yet federal agents continued the pursuit. For the first time since his disappearance, William Prescott had left a trail. And that trail was still warm. Inside the Atlanta Command Center, dozens of analysts worked without rest. Maps covered digital screens, flight records streamed continuously, financial transactions updated by the second. Every new piece of information narrowed the search. Attorney General Victoria Reynolds stood near the operations table. She hadn't slept in nearly 30 hours. Neither had most of her team. The notebook recovered from Prescott's estate had become the center of attention. Forensic specialists carefully scanned every page. The contents were explosive: names of donors, secret agreements, political favors, undisclosed payments. The notebook revealed how influence had been bought and sold for years. But one page stood out above all others. A page labeled simply "Contingency." Deputy Director Lawson studied the scanned image. "What does that mean?" An analyst enlarged the handwritten notes. The answer became clear. Prescott had planned for failure. If investigators ever got too close, he intended to disappear. The notebook outlined multiple escape routes, multiple safe houses, multiple identities. The level of preparation shocked everyone. This was not a man improvising. This was a man preparing for collapse years in advance. "Did he use any of them?" Victoria asked. The analysts worked quickly. Minutes later, one raised his hand. "Possibly." The room focused on him. A private marina near Jacksonville recorded an unusual fuel purchase yesterday morning. He displayed surveillance images. A large offshore yacht appeared on screen. The vessel operated through a shell corporation listed in Prescott's notebook. General Whitaker crossed his arms. "Can we track it?" The analyst nodded. "We've been trying." He switched displays. Satellite data filled the room. The yacht disabled its public transponder 12 hours ago. Several people groaned. That made tracking significantly harder, not impossible, but harder. Then another analyst suddenly stood. "I think we have him." Silence swept through the room. The analyst enlarged a satellite image. Far off the eastern coast, a heat signature appeared. A vessel, moving slowly, attempting to avoid major shipping lanes. "Distant?" Victoria asked. "Approximately 100 miles offshore." Lawson immediately picked up a phone. Within minutes, the United States Coast Guard joined the operation. Aircraft launched, patrol vessels changed course, federal resources converged toward the target. Back in Atlanta, Ethan Cole watched events unfold. The entire situation felt surreal. Less than a week earlier, he had been driving through Georgia toward a routine meeting. Now a national corruption network was collapsing around one missing politician. The consequences would echo for years. maybe decades. Hours passed. The pursuit continued through darkness and rough seas. Finally, just before dawn, a Coast Guard surveillance aircraft established visual confirmation. The command center erupted with activity. Video appeared on the main screen. A white yacht battled rising waves. Its course changed repeatedly. Its crew appeared increasingly desperate. Then a Coast Guard officer's voice came through the speakers. Target vessel identified. Everyone listened. Positive visual on William Prescott. Applause erupted throughout the room. Years of corruption, days of investigation, countless hours of work. The manhunt was ending. But Prescott wasn't finished. A second transmission arrived moments later. The officer sounded alarmed. "Command, we have a problem." The room quieted immediately. "What kind of problem?" Lawson asked. The answer chilled everyone. "The yacht is changing course toward international waters." A map appeared. The vessel's projected route flashed red. If Prescott crossed a certain boundary, the legal and diplomatic complications would multiply instantly. Victoria stared at the screen. The finish line was finally visible. Yet it remained just out of reach. And somewhere on that storm-tossed yacht, William Prescott appeared willing to risk everything for one final chance at escape. Dawn broke over the Atlantic in shades of grey and gold. The storm that had dominated the night was beginning to weaken, but the sea remained rough. Massive swells rolled beneath the fleeing yacht as it pushed toward international waters. Inside the Federal Command Center, nobody celebrated yet. William Prescott had been found. That was only half the battle. Now they had to bring him back. Attorney General Victoria Reynolds stood before the operations screen, watching the live feed from a Coast Guard surveillance aircraft. The yacht appeared small against the endless ocean. For years, Prescott had lived surrounded by power. Security teams, private jets, political influence, television cameras. Now he was reduced to a tiny white vessel running from the consequences of his own decisions. "Status?" Victoria asked. A Coast Guard commander answered immediately. "Two intercept vessels are closing. Air support is maintaining visual contact." The room waited. Minutes felt like hours. Then the surveillance feed changed. The yacht suddenly slowed. Everyone leaned forward. "What's happening?" An officer reviewed incoming data. "Engine trouble." The irony was impossible to ignore. After years of carefully planned corruption, hidden accounts and escape routes, mechanical failure might end the entire operation. The yacht drifted sideways against the waves. Coast Guard vessels rapidly closed the distance. There would be no escape. No dramatic disappearance, no secret refuge. Only accountability. 2 hours later, William Prescott stepped onto the deck with his hands raised. The image was transmitted nationwide. Millions watched. The man once considered a future presidential candidate now stood surrounded by federal officers, defeated, aged, alone. Back in Atlanta, silence filled the command center. Nobody cheered. The moment felt too significant for celebration. Victoria finally exhaled. "It's over." Deputy Director Lawson shook her head. "No." She looked toward the stacks of evidence. "Now it begins." She was right. The arrests continued for months. Trials followed. Investigations expanded. The corruption network stretched farther than anyone imagined. Dozens of officials lost positions. Several agencies underwent reforms. New oversight measures were introduced. Victims finally received compensation. Families who had spent years fighting impossible battles finally found justice. And at the center of it all remained a simple truth. None of it would have happened without one routine traffic stop, one bad decision, one officer who believed nobody would challenge him. A year later, Ethan Cole stood on the porch of his Virginia home overlooking the Blue Ridge Mountains. Autumn leaves painted the hills in brilliant shades of red and gold. The air felt crisp, peaceful. His life had largely returned to normal. Military service continued. New assignments arrived. The headlines moved on. The country focused on other stories. But some changes endured. A framed newspaper article hung inside his study. Not because it featured him, because it featured ordinary citizens who had finally been heard, people whose voices mattered. His phone buzzed. A message appeared from General Marcus Whitaker. The final convictions had been completed. The last appeals had failed. The case was officially closed. Ethan smiled. Not from satisfaction, from perspective. He thought back to the roadside in Briar Creek, the flashing lights, the handcuffs, the humiliation, the anger he chose not to unleash. That choice changed everything. Real strength had never been about power. It had never been about intimidation. It had never been about winning arguments. Real strength was discipline, patience, character, the ability to remain steady when the world demanded a reaction. As the sun settled behind the mountains, Ethan watched shadows stretch across the valley below. Roads twisted through the countryside, cars traveled in every direction, thousands of journeys, thousands of choices, thousands of opportunities to become either a problem or a solution. The corruption network had fallen. The victims had been heard. The guilty had faced justice. And the lesson remained. No title makes a person honorable. No badge creates integrity. No position guarantees character. In the end, people reveal themselves through choices. Some choose greed, some choose fear, some choose silence, and some choose courage. Ethan turned toward the house where his family waited. Warm light spilled from the windows. Laughter drifted through the evening air. The fight was over. The future was waiting. He stepped inside and quietly closed the door behind him. Subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, and share this video.